at you.
Hello and welcome to the Two Joes podcast. This is Joe Teller, also known as Main Joe, coming at you with my co-host Mojo on the line, and our special guest today is Will Bagley.
Welcome, Will.
Let's lose the glasses.
So this is his second appearance with us here, and first one was audio only, and I think that might have been my favorite podcast to date. I mean, he took us down to Mississippi for 6 weeks, and the man just has encyclopedic knowledge of Utah history and
Western history.
Western, I should say. I don't mean to.
People in Utah don't like to admit it, but they're merely a small part of the American world. A kinky part, but a small part.
Well, if that whole plural marriage thing, I guess that is kinky, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, it was all about sex.
I don't believe it.
It was about family.
Yeah, family values. That's right. So,
no, it was about perverts getting young girls to sleep with them.
Yeah.
Didn't I see something in the news just the other day about how polygamy is being decriminalized in Utah?
That's right. Our legislature decided that was the plan when they ran their statehood scam in 1896, that they would get to be their own state, and then they could they could legalize polygamy. And now they've done it.
I kind of have, haven't they?
Well, they're ignoring their constitution, which swore we'll never, ever, ever allow polygamy.
I didn't realize that.
Well, wait, gentlemen. First things first. Will, how have you been holding up through the pandemic? Have you shown any symptoms or anything, or you know anybody who's caught it? Any of that stuff? How you been doing?
Oh, this is a personal story. I have been working with a dear friend and great bookman, Kent Chance, and he has helped me appraise. He has appraised my papers, which we will try to both sell and donate to a research library. And most of my papers, or 100 boxes of my papers, are currently at the University of Utah, and we were hoping to take the rest of them there. But this is the retirement that I never properly planned. And, well, the timing was less than perfect, because it's not a great time when the idiot in chief decides to completely obliterate the American economy for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And people are reluctant to spend big amounts of money, believe it or not. And since we're only at the start of our brand new Great Depression, it's hard to imagine when they might be in that mood again.
Yeah.
Such a good
my
point.
sense is not for a long time.
Well, I must disagree with you, Will. I don't think he decided to destroy it. He was just so incompetent, he didn't know what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't a conscious choice. He just thought, oh, we're impregnable. We can't be touched. The American economy can handle anything. Just absolute worst president at the worst time we could have had. It's
and we those of us who had human sympathies tended to notice that this guy was a rolling disaster and an encyclopedia of different bizarre mental conditions.
Yes, yeah.
But I never thought through what's going to happen when we confront a real crisis.
Exactly right. Yeah, I never thought about that either. Yeah.
We are now in the 21st century, and we are going to see crises that we cannot imagine.
Yeah.
This is the first one, but he's demonstrated that we'd have been better off with Bozo the Clown in the White House
Yeah.
Donald J.
Yeah.
Trump. Oh, wait. I shouldn't. That sounds ungrateful, doesn't it? Because guess what I got in the mail today?
Oh, let's see it. What?
It's adding to the deficit, but hey, what the hell? Hang on.
He's going into the kitchen.
That's great.
It is. I went to his house once.
Yeah.
When I was like President's Day. He and I went out to breakfast.
That's right.
Now, let's remember that one of Donald J. Trump's targets is the United States Post Office,
Yeah.
which is part of the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
Yep.
And he sent this particular notice, which is English on side 1.
The White House. Wow.
There we go.
Yeah.
And Spanish on side 2.
Wow. Wow.
I thought he kept them all out. I thought that
Yeah, I
never made it. What did we need Spanish for?
Maybe
You know?
he's more
Somebody's
open-minded than I
gotta pay for that
realized.
stupid wall. But anyway, this is his idea of dealing with the Depression, which is sending everybody a letter with his grotesque signature scrawled at the bottom. But I don't believe that he actually sat down and signed all 100 million copies of this letter. So this White House letter is not worth the paper it is printed on.
No. Well, I think he did. You know, he signs them while he's on the toilet at 3 o'clock in the morning, tweeting with one hand and signing the letters with the other.
Thinking great thoughts, no doubt.
With
Yeah,
his super
yeah.
brain, yeah.
Well, Will, could I ask you really quick about you've had some struggles recently with Medtronics and getting some insulin or a device for it. What's going on with that? And are you in any danger?
Well, I have what insurance companies call a chronic disease
They love those.
and a
Yeah.
pre-existing condition.
Oh, they love those even more.
Yeah.
But in every other country in the world, what the insurance companies call pre-existing conditions are called your medical history.
Yeah.
Everybody's got one.
That's a good point.
Yeah, mine's baldness. You see, that's
There
mine.
you go. But I've had it for 42 years now, and I have done my best to take care of myself, except I still like to eat good food, and I have not abstained from drinking entirely.
Attaboy.
I try to drink in moderation because I figure out that if I didn't have diabetes, drinking wasn't good for you in the first place, except for the fact that it helps fend off heart disease and stuff like that. But I have done it in moderation. And just the fact that I've survived for 42 years says I was doing something right.
Yeah.
And in 1987, thanks to my great therapist, Donna Tomke, I got an insulin pump. And it looked, let's pull it out here, just like this. And it's got a screw drive in one end, and you put in a what do you call it? A needle that injects stuff.
A dose? A syringe?
Syringe. This is a syringe that is connected to this tube that runs into my side, into my subcutaneous tissues, and it feeds me a steady rate of insulin. And it when I got it in 1987, I realized that until then, because you only had a very few tools with which to manage your diabetes, that diabetes was running my life. And I was working a full-time job as a writer, and I was raising two kids with my first wife, and it didn't make it easy, but it was doable. But the insulin pump was liberating, and it gave me the power to manage the disease much more effectively.
Yeah.
And at the time, I'd met Donna Tomke because I was part of a test, a national medical test to establish that keeping blood sugars in good control benefited diabetics. Now, this is like saying that quitting drinking if you're an alcoholic is a good idea. But and it seems obvious, but it's science. And to verify that it actually does help, they did their typical scientific test, which had a control panel of people who didn't do anything to keep their diabetes in check, and a control panel of people who did. And it turned out that people who did manage their blood sugars lived longer, felt better, and had generally better health.
Mm-hmm. So how's your struggles with getting your supplies right now? I saw your Facebook post recently.
Yeah.
And what's going on there? You're not in any danger right now of running out of supplies, are you?
Well, I'll show you what I do. I have a system called the Medtronic Silhouette system. And it has multiple components. One of the components is a tube, and the other component you can't see it, I'm sure, but is a needle that goes into your body, and you connect the tube to that, and that's how it delivers insulin subcutaneously. And to make it more economical, you use one set of infusion sets, which has two parts, being the cannula and the tubes. And the second part is just a cannula. But because in Medicare's wisdom, they decided that they would only ship odd numbers of boxes of the two components, so you could only buy or only get through Medicare 3 boxes at a time. So last time I got 2 boxes of MiniMed Silhouette infusion sets and 1 box of MiniMed cannulas.
Oh, no.
Now, okay, so that meant I ran out of cannulas long before I ran out of infusion sets. But I didn't, it seems wasteful to me to not have both components of the system, the Silhouette system, which is what I'm using. So I began trying to get the cannulas, and this time I would get 2 boxes of cannulas and 1 box of infusion sets. So it would eventually all balance out.
You got what you need right now. Let's hope.
But because you need to see your doctor regularly to keep Medicare happy, and because I don't drive anymore, my doctor said I didn't have to go in and get a fasting blood glucose test for my last checkup, which was on March 5th. And so that's really the cause of all this, because we didn't deliver to Medicare the precise paperwork that they demand, so they can manage this stuff, and they generally manage it pretty effectively. But you'll notice the date on which I last met with Gina, my doctor. It was March 5th.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to go up to Foothill Clinic and get a fasting blood sugar, and then everybody would be happy. But within a week of March 5th, all hell broke loose, and I decided I didn't want to go into a clinic which would be full of sick people and get this awful COVID-19 crap. Okay, so I then tried to refill the order about a month ago, and they gave me a runaround saying that they had to have this paperwork and this, that, and the other. And so I actually in my closet found a box that had both the components in the box, and it helped me get through about 3 more weeks of this stuff. But then earlier this week, I'm flat out of cannulas, and I decided, well, I better go back and start jumping through the hoops and try to get my cannulas and the rest of the infusion set sent to me. And so I got on the phone on Monday, and I spent all day, not all day, I spent about 2 hours with a service person explaining that I really did need the cannula sets to use this effectively. And they assured me that we had jumped through all the hoops and that they would ship the supplies, which had both components in it, within a few days. And then the next day, I get an email that says, no, we're not going to ship them, no matter what the service person told you. And you need to call back. And so I wound up calling back and being put on hold because there's a COVID disaster going on.
Of course.
And eventually I got through to somebody who told me, what they do is they kick you back to finance. And because they say you're not paying for this stuff. And it's finance that puts the hold on it, they claim. Well, the trouble is I spent 2 hours, and that was mostly getting finance to admit that it's all paid up. He didn't have any hold on it. We're not holding it up. But we're dealing with a bureaucracy here, and that's just the way they work.
Wow.
And so anyway, I spent at least an hour yesterday working to get them to ship me my cannulas, which is this thing with only the insertion set on it.
Now, does that work with the insulin pump, or is that instead of the insulin pump?
No, this is what you have to have
to make the insulin pump work. I see.
And
if you're having this problem, there's probably a lot of other people having this problem during this pandemic, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think it's more the situation that I should have, come hell or high water, have gotten that fasting blood sugar. And then I think everybody would be happy. But because I was unable to, and that makes my situation.
Or are you supposed to have a 90-day supply? But of course, that would be next to impossible to get, right? For the next pandemic, or when it spikes in the fall, and we have to shut down again.
That'd be nice.
I bet you couldn't do it if you wanted to. 90 days? I doubt it.
But anyway, so I spent most of yesterday afternoon dealing with their service people we're in Texas, and it turns out that they agree that they will ship me a box of Medtronic silhouettes. Can you guys see the box?
Kind
Yeah.
of.
Mhm.
Okay. But guess what? There are two kinds of boxes. There's the infusion set and there's the cannula set. And so they ship me overnight a
The
box.
wrong one. The wrong one, right?
And of course, it's the wrong one.
Oh,
Man.
But I will be able to keep my pump pumping and use it. But it's just wasteful. And
yeah.
it would be nice to be able to communicate to the service people, here's how your system works. And here's the part I need. I gave them the part number of the part I need. It is an MMT. Oh, I've got all this on my
Yeah.
computer.
That's happened to my wife a lot too. It's where she has to tell the insurance companies how this works. Here's actually what the law says, because they don't know. They don't get
Yeah.
trained or.
No, they're making $13 an hour.
Yeah,
What do they know?
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
They have no incentive or anything.
Well, Will, it all comes down to those three magic words, isn't it? For-profit healthcare.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And what we have are people making billions of dollars, or at least multiple millions every year, because they're profiting from healthcare.
Yeah.
The gangsters who jacked up the price of insulin from $20 a vial, which is what it was in the year 2000, to $400 a vial,
Yeah.
are gangsters. And
Yeah.
they're a part of a crime family that is backed up by some of our biggest drug companies, notably Lilly.
Who own the politicians?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
one thing that really angers me is back in the fight over Obamacare, there was a proposal to have a government option which would allow anybody who wanted to leave the insurance companies and get basically Medicare.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
But what blue dog Democrat put the kibosh on that?
Obama?
Utah's Jim Matheson.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
what was Jim Matheson notable for? He got more money from insurance companies than any other person in Congress. So he was essentially part of the gang.
He's part of the gang.
But now, here, this is a bottle of insulin.
That's $400 right there.
$400 right there. Yeah.
Does it look like it's worth $400?
Well, to
considering
you,
it
maybe.
considering
Yeah.
it keeps you alive, heck yeah, but
And I've been using these things since 1978, and I can't remember what they cost in 1978. It was probably $5. But one of the prime people behind jacking up the price of this from $20 to $400 was named Alec Azar.
Oh, Trump's health advisor. Yeah.
When it came time to appoint somebody to manage Health and Human Services, who did they pick? They picked old Alex because he knew how to really squeeze the nuts of who needed life-saving drugs.
wow.
Man. Well, aside from that, Will, what have you been doing during the pandemic? Do you get out of the house much at all? Are you still going to your office down there on State Street?
I haven't been going to the office much, partly because since I quit driving in January, I was relying on Uber, and in 2 weeks from today, I will turn 70 years old, and so I'm a vulnerable target, and
Yeah, you're at risk.
I have been writing a poem called 70 for the last month. And it is about how I never expected to live to 70, and I never really wanted to. And it looks like I still might not make it.
You're looking pretty healthy from this
You're looking
perspective.
good, yeah, man. I like that bolo tie.
And that's just it. As I've written this poem, I go, you know what? If you look at the odds, I made it this far. The odds are I'm going to make it all the way to 70, COVID or no COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But as
You know,
my friend David Bigler used to tell me, no man knows the hour. And
No.
it's one of the conundrums of life is that we all know we're here, but we don't know. We know when we were born, but we don't know when we'll be leaving or under what
Yeah.
conditions.
Mm.
And I was always a pretty carefree kind of guy. And for a long time, my retirement plan was basically love hard. Oh, what's that? What's that classic phrase?
Oh, well, I know let's see.
Well,
Oh,
let
no.
me take this.
Die young and leave a good-looking corpse. I remember
Yeah,
that one.
love hard, die young, and leave a good-looking corpse.
Yeah.
And so that's not really much of a retirement plan, especially when you get to be almost 70.
Well,
But
remember, one of my favorite philosophers is Keith Richards, the guitarist for the Rolling Stones. And he was interviewed not long ago and said, well, nobody wants to grow old, but nobody wants to die young either. So, the secret is just grow old as slowly as you can, and you're doing a damn good job of it, Will. Damn good job.
Yes. Well, one of my dearest friends is Trent Harris, the world's greatest filmmaker. And Trent, I was complaining at Dick and Dixie's, the bar we would hang out at occasionally, that I really couldn't get moving on the third volume of my Overland Trail opus.
Mm.
And he said, well, what you need to do is take a break. Take a couple of months off and go do something else. And then you can come back and write and you'll be all ready to go with it. And then we had this conversation in February. And man, oh man, what a surprise. Look what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I went into the office today and found that yes, I did have much more energy and I was ready to get back and tackle it. And so I've now got a much clearer vision of what needs to be in this third volume and how
That's
to
great.
do it.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, you got 2 weeks. I hope you can get it done in 2 weeks.
Oh, the thing is, if I can get up and running, where I get up, I go to work, I write 500 words and follow a plan on how to get the damn book written by the end of the year, that'll do it. That'll work.
Yeah.
And I already know what I want to explain and what I want to show in this book, which covers 1853 to 1860. And now that time period in American history is important. Why is that important? Because between 1853 and 1860, the United States destroyed itself.
Mm.
We had a series of incompetent presidents who refused to address the disease that was destroying the country, which was slavery. We had a bunch of talented and ethical politicians who had decided that a country divided against itself cannot stand. And they decided that we had to do something about slavery. And it wasn't easy because who wrote the Constitution?
Slaveholders.
Slave owners. And one of their primary objectives was to protect slavery. And because turning human beings into property proved to be very, very profitable. The white slave owning class in the southern United States is the richest minority of any society at any time in human history.
Wow.
The cotton business was a very, very good business, unless you happen to be actually working the cotton and raising it. The wealth of the United States, in many ways, is built on the backs of brown and black people, slaves. And you can tell that I'm not a raving fan of capitalism, but a free market it can be a very good thing. It's simply when you take away people's humanity that it becomes a very, very bad thing.
And is that greed that does that? Capitalism is one thing, but when you take it to the nth degree, when greed kicks in and you just squeeze in that lemon for all it's worth, is that the crux of it?
Well, that's one of the questions that you have to ask as a historian. What makes people do this crazy stuff? Yeah. Why should the United States pick sides and create two armies, huge armies, the biggest armies in the world, and go at it for 4 years and kill 750,000 young men? It was foolhardy. It was counterproductive. And it was tragic. But we look at what we've done to the country in the last 30 years. And it's
40.
why writing this book is so haunting. Back in 2008, I was working on a book I was doing on contract called, it was ultimately titled, Always a Cowboy, Judge Wilson McCarthy and the Rescue of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. So
I see it, 2008,
in 2007, 2008, I was writing about how the United States got into the Depression in 1928.
29. October of 29.
Yeah, it was October 29. But being that it was 2007 and 2008, I could see the United States doing exactly the same stuff they did in 28, 29. So it was spooky. It was really spooky. And what was great about Always a Cowboy is that Wilson McCarthy was a man of great integrity. He'd been raised a Mormon cowboy in Alberta. He had wound up going to law school at Queen's University in Ottawa, and then had graduated from Columbia Law School and came and practiced law in Utah. And he was a very, very talented executive leader, and he was into banking, and he'd worked with Herbert Hoover on the Colorado River Commission, which was set up during the Hoover administration. And Herbert Hoover's plan to beat the Great Depression was to lend money to banks
Yeah.
And railroads, the biggest corporations in the world.
On that time,
And
yeah.
what
Today,
caused the Great Depression?
and it's banks to
Banks and
banks and airlines.
railroads.
Now it's airlines
Banks,
today.
airlines, and cruise ships, which a lot of
Yeah.
them aren't even registered in the U.S. Why are we
Yeah.
bailing out cruise ships?
They're not paying
Exactly.
taxes here.
Yeah.
No,
So, Will, just before Zoom only lets us record for like 40 minutes, so we've got like 3 minutes left. I just want to do a quick touch base with you on this whole COVID-19 thing. What similarities do you see between it and the 1918 pandemic that we should be paying attention to?
not that you were around in
or that
1918,
are
of course,
haunting. Well,
but-
he's a historian.
no, I
Bill.
remember.
Yeah.
I remember my grandparents lived through it.
Well, before
and
you get into that,
they
I'm
had
sorry.
very vivid memories of it.
Would you be willing to do another 40 minutes with us, Will? Because we only got a couple of minutes left.
Let's see if Zoom actually shuts us down.
Okay, fair enough.
They're a very kind corporation.
They were for a while. They when we praised them, but lately
They've shut us down recently. Yeah.
Maybe they don't like
We'll
us.
simply start it up again.
There you go.
Okay, that works. So let's not, Will, let's not get into your recollections because I want to hear every bit of it, and I don't want to see it get cut off right in the middle.
Good point. Yeah.
What I do want to, I want to raise a parallel.
How do you want to wrap it up? Because we got 2 minutes left.
Okay, I will wrap it up with my discussion of Always a Cowboy.
Okay.
Because what I was watching in 2007, 2008 was very much like what led up to the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the bottom fell out of the American market in 2008, and we entered what people making more than $100,000 a year called the Great Recession. Well, I noticed that the only people I saw who called it the Great Recession were making at least $100,000 a year, and they all dismissed the idea that it was as another Great Depression. And besides that, they'd come up with a way to fix it. And what was their solution? Why?
Banks. Bail out the banks.
Bail out the banks and the corporations. And I knew from my experiences reading about the failure of Herbert Hoover that it wasn't going to work because you don't pay off the people who caused the problem.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I loved Obama, but I'll tell you what.
So does the question
back in
become their memories are too short, or did they know exactly what they were doing?
Well, they're Republicans. They knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
They were going to lend money to the people who caused the problem.
Well, they were going
And
to
then
bail out their backers.
The Republicans will give you the reason saying, well, we have to bail out these corporations because they employ so many people. If we don't, then these people are unemployed and they don't get a paycheck. Well, why not just send those billions of dollars, distribute it right to the employees? Let those banks and airlines and railroads and everything go up, you know?
Well, the thing is, banks will take care of themselves, as
Yeah.
we've seen.
Always
And what
have.
did they use that bailout money for? They used it to buy up the assets that they had made worthless.
Stock buybacks, yeah.
Yeah. And in some ways, we've discussed what is it about greed that makes it such a curse? And well, let's start with pandemics. And I'll start talking about the granddaddy of them all, the Black Death.
Ooh,
Oh.
okay. Going way back.
When you look at the historical impact of disease on humanity, it's really hard to top the Black Death, which hit Europe in 1350 to lasted for several years, and is said to have killed maybe a third of the population.
Yeah,
I've heard those numbers.
big numbers.
And one of the advantages we have in modern times is science, that we understand that it's not curses and it's not bad air, that it's a disease that is caused by infections and bacteria. And nobody in Europe had any idea that the disease was being spread by rats, which got off of ships.
Or the fleas on the rats, yeah.
And their fleas got onto human beings and bit them and gave them the Black Death. But people reacted to it very much like we're reacting to COVID-19 disease, which is the rich got out of town and they went and hid out at their private estates. And it had a definite impact on European culture because we get some of the classics of late medieval literature out of the Black Death, such as Boccaccio's Decameron, which is stories that a bunch of aristocrats tell each other as they're hiding from the Black Death. And it's fun because it shows you that people and sex have always been together and of interest.
Sex has always been a player, huh?
Yeah, but so is death.
Well, of
And
course. Yeah.
one of the impacts of the Black Death was that it essentially transformed society. It had such a major social impact when a third of the people die. It liberated people. It meant that you could, people who'd been bound to local lords found that they could rely on other ways to make a living. And you had a class of craftsmen and creative people and merchants who transformed the world in the 15th century that we now, and launched what began, or what we now call the Renaissance. Now, whether or not the COVID-19 virus will so transform America that we have an equivalent revolution and rebirth.
Well, did the Spanish flu do something like that? I mean, what did we have? In 1918, the Spanish flu, tail end of World War I. We went right into the roaring 20s. So times were good, right into the crash.
A little bit of a renaissance there in
maybe
1920s.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, there was a culture, and people shook off old ways. That's what's intriguing.
Okay.
Yeah, and forgot the old,
And in many ways, what we're seeing with COVID-19 is the obsolescence of having 1% of the people have 90% of the money. And we're going to have to do something to change that. We've put our medical system into absolute chaos. And we're now seeing that hopefully the American people will see that we need to figure out how to give medical security to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think the 1% will realize this, or
they'll have to be fought? They'll have to be battled.
I suspect that it'll be a fight.
Yeah, you don't think it'll just happen? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this goes back to my theory of numerical problems. So many of our problems are based on our inadequate ability to comprehend big numbers. You know, if you think hard about it, you can conceive of what $1 million is. But when you get to $1 billion, as Everett Dickinson said, he's a senator when I was a kid, $1 million here, $1 million there, $1 billion there, and pretty soon you're talking real money.
I remember that quote. Yeah.
But $1 billion is so much money that you would have to spend more money than probably all three of us make in a year every day to burn through it.
If even then. And now they're kicking around the number of trillions like it's nothing.
Yeah, which is completely incomprehensible.
That's crazy.
But what strikes me about the billion number is that even people who've accumulated a pile of $1 billion are still greedy, and it's never enough. And it occurred to me that, none of us are rich, and we work for livings, and we typically do what we can to live economically and support our families.
Within our means, right?
And we can't imagine what it would be like to not have to worry about money. But if all you're worrying about is how to get more of this stuff, it can't be a satisfying or fun
existence, life. I agree.
Activity.
Main John and I were just talking about this. I don't think greed is it's not a disease. It's not something you catch. It's something that just brings you joy. Some people get a joy out of robbing banks. That's what makes them happy in life. Making another $1 billion, that makes some people happy. It's
there you go.
I don't know. I don't get it either. I have all I need. I know I have all I need, and most of my friends, it all varies. But actually, I do consider myself pretty rich. I'm pretty rich.
Then you are rich.
Yeah.
You're a rich man because you know what you've got. If you've got all the money you need, you're much happier than a billionaire who has to get another $1 billion. Or let's say if you're Donald J. Trump, who probably never had $1 billion on the
Probably.
balance sheet, where he didn't owe $5 billion and claim that he was a billionaire.
Well, he went to the Supreme Court to hide those documents that would prove any of this, didn't he? Why? Why did he feel the need to do that? I don't understand that, Will.
No, defies understanding.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
but the ability to say, I have enough is one of the keys to happiness, I think.
Yeah.
And to
Gratitude.
appreciate what you do have.
Gratitude, yeah, absolutely.
But
So
maybe it's not human nature.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
So what lessons from 1918 can we or should we be using now? I mean, we must have learned some lessons from that whole pandemic and how it went down, and some places isolated, other places didn't.
Yes. And there are practical lessons. But whether people learn anything from the past is one of the bugaboos that historians have to live with.
It's a good word. Did Shakespeare come up with that word, bugaboo? I think he might have.
Probably.
Yeah.
But
People don't seem to learn and remember, do they, Will? All you have to do is pick up a history book. All you got to do is read about what it was like back then. And, please listen to the experts. They might not have lived through it, but they've studied it for years. Just listen to them. But that's easy for me to say. I've got all I need. I'm rich. My life hasn't been changed all that much over the past couple of months. So, it's easy for me to say, hey, just write it out, man. Listen to the experts. Stay cool. Hey, be cool. Just write it out. Much more complex than that, of course. A lot of people suffering. A lot of suffering out there.
and what I was going to say, what terrifies me, but I'm not the kind of guy who gets scared. I just don't like fear, and I will not live in fear. Mm-hmm. But as a historian, I can't see how we're going to get out of this. We have dug a hole that is so deep, and it just keeps getting deeper. You guys both know about the first rule of holes.
When you reach rock bottom, stop digging.
Yeah, stop digging.
Mhm.
And what are we doing as a country every day? We're bringing in the heavy equipment so we can dig deeper.
Well, yeah, especially
Bringing
under
in the
Trump, it
drills
seems
now.
that way. But
It's,
I even take my concern even further than that. This whole planet is just slowly but surely dying, and there is no one on the face of this earth that's taking enough drastic, big, bold steps to make a dent in it and to turn it around. It's just that's what worries me. I worry about the future my daughter's going to have.
well, one optimistic saying, this might have been Winston Churchill or Mark Twain. I don't remember, but rock bottom is a great place to start climbing. And along those lines, like a dead end is a great place to turn around. So
Exactly.
let's stay a little optimistic on these, and um,
Well,
I,
yeah.
I think finally Trump might have met his Waterloo in the past few weeks, past few months. He just might have. It'll take time to tell. We won't know until November, unless he drops dead. We won't know until November. But he's survived so much stuff that
Oh, he is so slippery, man. I just don't.
mm,
No, nothing sticks to him.
maybe he is a true leader. Look at all I can survive, guys. Nobody's survived anything like I have. All the stuff I've survived, it's terrific. It's fantastic.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never denied how beautiful it is.
Mm.
I love how he invokes Lincoln. The press has never treated anybody this bad except maybe Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Yeah, Trump, you're a
Yeah.
regular Lincoln, you. Oh, Lord.
Uh,
I don't mean to switch topics too much, Main Joe, but we have an expert on with us right here, and I'm going to just totally throw one out of left field, if I may.
Go
Uh,
for
the
it.
Mark Hoffman bombings in the early '80s.
yes.
Um, I've studied that a little bit, and I would love to hear some perspectives and anecdotes and experiences that you had during that what was about 6 months or 8 months, 10 months. Well, the trial went on
Oh, it
for
was a couple of years.
yeah, yeah,
The Hoffman phenomenon lasted through much of the early 1980s,
yeah.
and he was a scam artist. And one of the questions that people don't ask about Hoffman is, what created him? Where did he come from? Why did he believe that he could defraud people without consequences?
Mm-hmm.
And it was partly because he grew up in a magical society. And he grew up in Mormon culture, which was based on a thoroughly unbelievable story told by a 19th century con man who claimed a magic angel came down and gave him a magic golden book, and he translated it with magic spectacles. And magically, thousands of people believed him and gave him all their money, and then gave him their daughters and their wives. And he literally got away with murder. But what did what made Mark Hoffman? Well, what made him was that he was a man without a conscience, and
Mm-hmm.
that he had grown up in a society that believed stuff that was patent nonsense and obvious nonsense. And people believed it passionately. And he was a pre-med student when he began to see that he could deceive people based on these deeply held religions.
Mm-hmm.
He'd also had deep experience in forgery.
There,
Apparently,
perfect storm right there. Yeah,
yeah,
he had it all. You met. He's a medical student. He was very intelligent. Grew up in a magical society, and like we mentioned before, be careful what you encourage people to do. Go find joy in life. Go find what makes you happy. He found it happy to deceive too, and he was good at it. That was the last point you just mentioned. He was also good at forgery. So it was what a character. What an incredible. How many biographies have been written about him? Would you say?
there are about 5 very good books that have been written about
Hmm.
him. And interesting, his earliest known forgery or creation was a dime, and he had electroplated a mint mark on this dime that changed it from being worth
Worthless to, wow.
10 cents to being worth
He
several
studied,
hundred dollars.
he electrolyted it. He studied how to do this. He was an intelligent person.
Yeah.
Those are
But
the
he
scariest.
he also shows the disadvantages of not having any values, any sense of any conscience, any sense of how destructive your actions can be. And I'm a member of a venerable group of Utah historians called Utah Westerners. And several of the members were close friends of Mark Hoffman, particularly Kurt Bench, who still is selling books in South Salt Lake and is one of my very best friends. He's a lovable guy and as honest as the day is long. And he had really gotten his first big break as a bookman through Deseret Book. And he was selling used books. And he met Hoffman, and Hoffman had this magical ability to see what people were looking for and find it.
Yeah, he always found it. He always found it. Yeah.
Which was suspicious.
Yeah. After a while, not at first. He got away with it for he had the white salamander letter. Wasn't that one of them? And then
that was the peak of his abilities.
Okay. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, and I can see why you chose to stay here, both you and your brother. I can see why you stayed here in Salt Lake. This is fertile ground for amazing stories. It's fascinating history here.
It is, and it's that key, stories. And the politics of Utah is what intrigues Pat. That's what he's studied.
Yeah.
And it's gangsters, it's crooks,
Yeah.
it's a society that purports to be deeply religious, but only believes in the almighty buck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if that's the core of your belief system, your life is going to be really meaningful or satisfying.
Very true. Yeah. What's the time counter, Main Joe?
It hasn't notified me yet. Usually it notifies me with 10 minutes left.
10 minutes. Cool.
So
we got time.
We still
then.
got some time.
We got
So
time.
I want to get back to Will's recollection of his, did you say your grandfather's dealing with the pandemic in 1918? Or you said you had some memories or some stories?
Yeah,
Well, I
that's
remember
right.
hearing about it when I
Yeah.
was a kid in
Okay.
the 1950s.
Okay.
And
See, what I read recently was that in Utah, the first wave of the pandemic didn't really affect Utah much, being a rural place and all that. But that second wave that came through in the fall, then it definitely hit them hard. And they did close places down in the fall, and they didn't reopen until like January. And when the movie theaters and that opened up in January, it was a big deal. Can you imagine 1918, 1919? There's no internet. There's barely working phones, and everything's shut down. Those few things that you can do and socialize are gone. And then when I came back, that must have been a wild time.
what's intriguing is to see people wearing masks. And that apparently was pretty effective. Where you did it, it worked.
Yes.
I'll tell you what,
those.
the pandemic I do remember was polio.
Oh, nasty, nasty. Yeah.
And I had friends who were crippled up by polio.
Oh, wow.
That one would either kill you or cripple you. It didn't leave you alone. It left you with something.
Popular guy.
Yes, he is.
In demand.
Let me handle
You
it.
got it. You got it.
Hey, Curtis.
Hey, Will, what's up?
I'm in the middle of a podcast. Can I call you back? Yep.
Yeah, call me whenever. I'll be up till midnight.
Okie doke. Bye-bye.
I'm guessing it's his son. Maybe.
Maybe. You know, another good invention, Will, you just showed me another good software invention. Get a phone call and push a button, and that person immediately joins the Zoom meeting. That would have been interesting.
If we were a Zoom, if we were running the meeting on Zoom, it'd probably work.
Mhm.
But I remember how it was lurking in the background of society.
Always. Yeah.
And what I loved to do as a kid living on East Mill Creek was to go and play in the creek and jump into it and swim around. But no, it was a virus, so nobody was really sure what the source was or how you got it.
Wow.
People would often go swimming and then catch it hours later.
Wow.
But there was this element of mystery, and that makes it more fearful.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's happening.
And
Now-
what were the rates of infection during the height of polio in America? Was it in the 40s or the 50s? When were the worst year for polio infections in America? When was that?
I don't know. That's a Wikipedia question. I'm not sure. But the panic was definitely there when I was a
Oh,
kid.
yeah. For years then, you grew up with the polio and fear, the fear of polio. You grew up thinking you could catch it any day. You could catch it on the playground, you know?
Yeah.
You grew up during that, okay.
So they never called polio a pandemic.
No?
They're calling it an epidemic.
Because it wasn't global. And means
1952.
global.
1952, the polio epidemic reached a peak in the U.S. Almost 58,000 reported cases and more than 3,000 deaths.
1952.
Yeah. You were 2 years old then, Will?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was always around until when did Jonas Salk give us the cure? What year was that?
About 1955, I think.
Okay.
I saw a picture of people lining up in downtown Salt Lake to get the vaccine.
1955, the U.S. began widespread vaccinations.
In when?
1955, very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is right on the borders of memory for me. So one of the first things I remember is getting a polio shot.
Yeah.
You just mentioned the borders of memory. I know what you mean there. You know, you were 2, 3, 4 years old. I remember my first memory. I don't know why, but I was an infant and I had a hernia operation when I was like 18 months old.
Wow.
That's the first image I can remember in my head, was looking up and there were lights around and like 3 masked people over me. That's the border of my memory right there.
18 months. I don't
2
think
years maybe? I don't remember. I'll have to ask my mom on that one.
I don't think I ever met anybody with a memory that young before.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But it seems to be that traumatic experiences
Yes.
do endure in deep, deep memory.
They get lodged in there, don't they?
That memory that I have might have been right when they sliced me open to fix the hernia. I just came online right there. Holy cow, what was that? You know, it's just, I don't know.
Well, I did come across a very interesting story. And as a historian, the disease I know best is cholera. And in 1849, there was a massive worldwide cholera pandemic. And 1849 was also the year that James K. Polk left the presidency. And he went home to Nashville, and by July, he was dead of cholera.
Wow.
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 which had invaded the United States up the river systems. It had gone up the Mississippi and Missouri river systems and up the Hudson River and the Erie Canal. But it's fascinating that the same way that diseases get transmitted in the 19th century is the way it happens today. It goes through your transportation systems. It's also what happened with the flu in 1918, was it traveled partly with the troops.
Boxcars with 40 troops in them.
Yep, yep.
Like a Japanese subway.
And,
And you mentioned it's the transportation vectors. There is one continent on the planet today that doesn't have COVID-19, Antarctica. There's been no transportation vector has got there, and they shut everything down right when they heard, so they're stuck there for the winter. It's their winter. It's our summer. It's their winter right now. They're shut off.
They're safe.
They're safe. Yeah.
But it's amazing to think of a disease. First of all, it kills James K. Polk, who's just left the presidency, and he's been replaced by Zachary Taylor. And a year after Polk dies, guess who gets cholera in Washington, D.C.?
Zachary
Taylor, and it kills him.
Wow. Man.
It kills 4,600 people in St. Louis and continues working its way out from St. Louis. Because you've got the gold rush going on, you have the disease being spread up to the Platte River, up to the Plains Indian sites. And there are terrifying stories of people who are healthy young men in the morning and dead by the evening.
Mm-hmm.
The United States Army was on the trail. The Corps of the Corps of Topographical Engineers had an enterprising captain named Stansbury, and he was coming out to survey the Great Salt Lake, and also to take a look at what the Mormons were up to, because nobody really knew, and the government was curious. But his first job was to see what Utah was like on the ground and to draw maps. So he's heading up the Platte River on the north side, and they see an Indian village with a bunch of teepees, but they don't see anybody moving around in it. And they go over and they take a look at what is this? And they find that it's full of dead Indians.
Wow.
A teepee. And imagine finding a lodge completely inhabited by the dead. Spooky stuff.
Yes, inhabited by the dead. That has like afterlife Yeah.
Home of the dead.
Yeah. Entirely inhabited by the dead. Man, oh man. Well, on that note, I'm going to pour myself a stiff whiskey. I'll be right back.
We're in our last 10 minutes. I'll do a summary. I'll try to see what we've been.
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Love to hear that.
Okay. We have had an intriguing conversation because me and the two Joes get along very, very well.
Yeah.
And we've been skating through history. We've been skateboarding might be a better topic. We've been looking at reflections of right now in the middle of May 2020 that we can see in past epidemics and past catastrophes and past economic crashes. And we learn that history should be educational. We should be able to learn a whole lot from it. but we never do. We just keep making the same damn mistakes.
Sure seems that way.
It sure seems like it, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it would be nice if humanity would just wise up.
Yeah.
Or if there was a group of sages, say historians, who could analyze the current conundrums.
Mojo and I were just talking. If one of us was president, one of the first things we would do is get a historian on our cabinet.
Yeah.
Would that be the first thing you do?
Yeah.
But beware, because historians often know the past quite well, but we all disagree about it. We do. We all learn different lessons from it.
Mm.
So generally, people like experts who tell them what they want to hear. And certainly that's the current state of the White House. But
Totally.
It's a human failing, and it's just the way it goes. Because history is complex. It's very, very hard to learn lessons, to learn what is relevant here. We learn that certainly you're a lot better off to deal with a pandemic on a scientific basis than, say, with magic.
Yeah. Or gut feelings and intuitions.
Yeah. Or re-election hopes.
Or trying to fix the economy that you just destroyed.
Yeah.
And what you're likely to do is kill a lot of people in the process.
Mm. And I heard a statistic that there's a possibility that we don't recover back to previous levels for 3 years, 2 to 3 years.
I've heard that too.
Economic possibilities.
That seems pretty reasonable. I mean, it doesn't seem far-fetched at all, really. Because this is worse than 10 years ago, in my opinion.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, by the way, what are you drinking there, Will? Is that orange juice or?
Oh, I had a terrible bottle of vodka, and I've been trying to get rid of it. And so I finally realized I couldn't keep foisting off this awful vodka on innocent victims. And so I decided I'd drink it myself.
Taking one for the team. All right.
There we go. But anyway, this has sure been fun, and
It's really good to see you again. Thanks very much for coming back on.
Thank you so much, Will. And you're in a pandemic like the rest of us, and I know you got some free time. Would you mind being our third guy for the next week or two, and just keep us up to date and let us know what you think about headlines and your brother's cartoons and Trump, whenever you might have some time.
Well, give me a call in a week and let's see if we've got any. What disasters have the Republicans managed to inflict upon the
I got to call you tomorrow. I'll have to call you tomorrow for that one.
What I love doing, comparing and contrasting with history. Like I saw this article from a book, How We Fucked It All Up, something like that, and it was basically this guy comparing, or talking about Hitler and how Hitler was this bumbling idiot essentially, and people kind of just let him go through, thinking they could control him, and just the comparison between that bumbling idiot picture he painted for me and what I'm seeing with Trump and his administration was just scarily similar.
And we have another comparison. Oh, sorry, Will. Please go ahead.
A lot of the Constitution was written to prevent demagogues from achieving power, or if a demagogue did achieve power, to limiting it through the balance of powers and all this. Mm-hmm. And it's intriguing to read Alexander Hamilton or James Madison's descriptions of a demagogue in the Federalist Papers. Mm. And there are definitely certain people on the current political scene who meet every element of that definition.
Yeah.
But
wow.
Systems
we
of
just-
government.
And we
that are
seem to have
200
blinders onto it or something, or I'm not sure what's going on, but
Well, and the last terrible president we had was also a Republican, George W. Bush. I mean, Obama, I had problems with him, but he doesn't even compare to these two. Obama was bookended by two of the worst presidents we can imagine.
two of the dumbest, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And both of those Republicans achieved power through racism. Remember back in 2000 when John McCain was running for president?
2000?
In 2000.
He might have. I can't remember
I
specifically.
bet he did. He was around forever. Yeah.
Well, he did, and he was the main block, the main guy who could
The main challenger to Bush.
Yes, and what did Bush do to torpedo John McCain?
To denigrate and insult and
I'm
make
trying
him
to
look.
think. I can't
I
remember.
don't remember. What was it? What was
It
it?
was in the South Carolina primary, where the Bush hacks began spreading a rumor that John McCain had a black child.
Oh, I do remember that. Yes, I do remember
Yes.
that. Yeah.
And it was a goddamn lie.
It was they were doing it on like phone calls, those robocalls. They were doing it through that, I think.
And even if it weren't a lie, what the F difference does it make if John McCain had a
Exactly.
man?
What in South Carolina?
South Carolina, yeah.
But here's the key question that I take from this series of incidents. Who would you rather have had in charge of the United States in September or August 2001? George the brush cutter Bush, who was warned that the
Bin Laden determined to strike in America.
yeah, exactly, or John McCain, or if it happened, if it was unstoppable, I think it was stoppable. If it was unstoppable, who would you rather have in charge? A draft dodger like George W. Bush?
B,
The
your second choice. Not A. I'll take your second choice.
I can see. I would have picked McCain too. However, McCain's he's a kind of a war hawk. He wasn't shy about going to war, so we
but at
still
least
might
he
have
knew
ended
what
up.
he was doing.
Yeah,
He
and we
wasn't
may
in-
not have gone into Iraq. I think we probably still went into Afghanistan, but maybe not.
We had to go into Afghanistan. We
Kinda did.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Well-
That's an amazing story you just told right there, Will. That they spread the rumor
I remember
just
that.
in South Carolina that John McCain had a black child, and
It was
Benjo,
enough
you
to
confirmed that.
Yes,
And
I remember that.
I think I remember echoes of that.
And it was enough to sway
Remember
it.
this: the saddest words of tongue and pen are these: "It might have
Right.
been."
What might have been. If W had lost in 2000, what would have been?
I think that
What would
about
have
Al
been?
Gore, and I think that about John Kerry and the Swift boat ads. The Swift boat
Swift
ads
voters
drive
for
me
truth.
crazy.
And that one was pretty much nationwide.
That
That
was
wasn't
blatant.
just South Carolina. That
Right.
wasn't just the South. He put that one everywhere. I remember that one. Swift voters for truth.
War hero. They just